must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
It is ridiculous and it is against the laws of nature that we can have somebody sitting pretty who takes home more money than the credible entrepreneur who is doing actual production of goods and services.
We always say it as it is. It is only in this country that when a thief is arrested, you hear elders from their tribe saying, he is our son and he is our thief.
If you are deviant and I call you leader,
Yes.
probably you are already a leader, but you are leading in the wrong direction.
We want to see the role of the youth in the security, governance, and development.
The youth that I meet and work with here, you know, we call them the millennials and X's and Y's, this and that. They don't necessarily want to live like their fathers and grandfathers, do business like their fathers and grandfathers. They're more independent, they're better educated, and they're the ones that are making everything move in this region.
We look at the issues, we talk about issues that impact people's lives in Africa. The African peoples themselves continue to cheer bad leaders, and because they cheer them on, they continue to be misled.
Let me ask you, doctor, would you rather be somebody who does not enjoy so much freedom but you are rich?
Yes.
Or you'd rather be poor who you are actually imprisoned by the poverty itself?
My goal is not to come here and say, I want the majority ownership, I want to own this, I want to own that, I want to do this. My goal is we all make money and we're all happy, and I help build a big business here.
Punchline is for Africa, with Africa, from Africa.
You know, when one is asked to talk about leadership in Africa, one's mind wanders in many directions, because in the recent past, the continent of Africa has been the subject of scrutiny from many quarters. There are those who are Afro-pessimists and take the view that Africa will never realize our potential. There are those Afro-optimists who take the view that the jury is still out on the success or otherwise of the continent of Africa. I am an Afro-optimist. I take the view that this continent has had a glorious past, and that this continent has had her trials and tribulations, but her better days are in the future. There are those who, when talking about Africa, are in the habit of dealing with Africa as if it were one monolithic block. They do not recognize that the beauty of Africa is in her diversity. And indeed, when you care to undertake a geographical survey of Africa, you will be amazed at what the west of Africa offers, what the center of Africa offers, what the south of Africa offers, what the Horn of Africa offers, and what the north of Africa offers. That is the continent that we are talking about today. And we are talking about her because she continues in many ways to punch below her weight. And many are the commentators who take the view that the reason why she continues to punch below her weight is because the men and women who have had the privilege and honor to serve her in different political capacities or leadership capacities have not served her well. There may be merit in that assessment, but those who are quick to judge, those whose only claim to fame is that they are professional fault finders, must ask many questions before they judge and condemn Africa unfairly. This continent, and I remember, and if we are to judge this continent fairly, we must go back to the past and look to the past and ask about this continent. And there are many who have written about this continent. How many of you here will forget the great writings of Senegal's Anta Cheikh Diop, who has documented in many ways the glorious past of the continent of Africa, the great kingdoms in Africa. When Europe was still in the caves, Africans were building monuments. If they were not building them in their Ashanti Empire, they were building them in Monomotapa here in Zimbabwe. And there is a sense in which all those have been consigned to the Museum of History. And those who look at Africa see Africa as a scar on the conscience of humanity, not remembering that they were themselves co-authors of Africa's misfortunes. We are the only continent and the only people in the world who have been commodified. How many of you will remember that agrarian Europe had to commodify Africa in order to realize our level of development? At one time in those early days, we will remember, even as we talk about leadership, that half of the population of this continent was taken away. If they were not taken away from Ghana, which they then christened Gold Coast, they were taken away from Angola. If they were not taken away from Angola, they were taken away from Mozambique. If they were not taken from Mozambique, they were taken from Senegal. If the Arabs were not taking us, the Europeans were taking us. If the Europeans in their different tribes were not conquering us, they were stealing from us. Those are the realities that we don't talk about when we talk about this continent. And you know, if one cares to judge the African continent, one must be historically conscious. The oldest African country after we regained our independence from Greater Chief. And the question that we must ask ourselves, why is it that this continent finds ourselves in that space? If it is not Europe summoning us, it is the United States of America summoning us. Everybody is in the business of summoning us. One may ask, what has this to do with leadership? You know, I listened to the Chinese president speaking in eloquent Mandarin, saying how the relationship between Africa and China is a mutually beneficial relationship. He spoke about Africa as if it was one country. He did not remind himself, in my mind, that there are 55 countries in Africa, or 54 if you ask Morocco. And I listened to the Chinese president specifically mentioning the Gambia and a few others, and Sao Tome and Principe, that they were welcomed back to the world because they had renounced their relationship with Taiwan and they had now recognized the one China policy. Do I say this because there is anything wrong with China? No. I'm saying this because the Chinese are providing leadership for their people. They know exactly what they want for their people, and they are doing exactly what they want for their people for the benefit of their people. The question that I'm posing to us, do we know what we want for our people? Are we doing what we need for our people? And the answer is, I doubt. Why do I doubt? I doubt because at the end of the entire enterprise, the Chinese president said that he had given, or his government had given, 60 billion United States dollars to 54 African countries. Notionally, therefore, each country would be entitled to no more than 1.5 billion. Half of the presidents who are present in China, each one of them, half of them, can produce 1.5 billion. Sportsmen in Europe and America, including boxers, can earn $1 billion in a single bout. And we are here celebrating and singing the praises of China because they gave us 60 billion. Once again, it is a statement of their ability to recognize what leadership is all about. I'm submitting to us that when we interact with people like the Chinese, there is something to learn from them. We may condemn them at forums such as this, but there is wisdom in asking ourselves, how is it that this country, which about 30 years ago could not feed half our population, has in 30 years during our lifetime succeeded in pulling up nearly 800 million people out of poverty? How is it that every road that is now being built in Africa, whether the road is in Benin, or in Nairobi, Kenya, or in Johannesburg, South Africa, or in Kigali, in Rwanda, or the Democratic Republic of Congo, there is a Chinese firm whose name I cannot pronounce as the contractor for that firm? How is it? How is it that China, which about 30 years ago did not produce a mobile phone, today, out of every 10 mobile phones, we are using 6 which are from China? If it is not Techno, it is some other phone. If we are not inviting Jack Ma, we are inviting another Chinese, because we have seen that they have the ability to organize their affairs. Some of us, particularly those of us who are in the middle class, our pride is that our child is learning Mandarin as a second language, not isiZulu, Mandarin. I fear, Bishop, that in the next few years, when they bring their children for baptism, and you ask them, how do you name this child? They'll say, Deng Xiaoping Simfiwe. I'm still talking about leadership. We have seen what leadership can do. Leadership has catapulted China to another completely different orbit. We have seen that leadership has catapulted South Korea to a different orbit. We have seen that leadership has catapulted Vietnam, which was bombed to the ground in 1975. Vietnam now produces more coffee than all African countries combined. What have they done? The men and women who have been given the opportunity to serve those countries long recognize that leadership is about service. And I can't agree more with the Honorable Minister who spoke before me and the good Dr. Aaron who spoke before me, that the true essence of leadership is self-discovery and self-esteem. You know, where I come from in my tribe, and I know in many African communities, when you do something very well, they say, you have done it like a white man. When you arrive on time, they say, he has arrived like a white man. When you speak well, they say, you spoke like a white man. When you dress well, you dress like a white man. When you go to a beautiful place in Africa, you say, it does not look like Africa, as if Africans are incapable of doing the right things. And I'm telling us that until the day that we exercise the ghost of low self-esteem, Africa is going nowhere. I'm submitting to us that history has demonstrated times without number that personal conquest is the beginning of true leadership. If you don't conquer yourself, you are going nowhere. And I'm submitting to us that Africa must now recognize that whatever institutions you have, until and unless it is populated by men and women who have ideals, those institutions will collapse, never to be put together again. So going forward, ladies and gentlemen, I hold the view that a conference such as this, that brings together men and women who recognize that Africa should occupy her pride of place amongst the Committee of Nations, must be a conference at which we speak to each other honestly. I think we Africans have been too kind to each other for too long. The time has come that we must annoy each other. It is only when we have annoyed you sufficiently that we can canalize that anger, and that anger can then be used to move mountains. And my joy is that Africa is not sleeping. My joy is that Africans are now beginning to wake up to the reality that we have not only the intellectual wherewithal, but that we have the resources to make our countries grow and grow in the proper direction. You know, not so long ago, and not so long ago in this case means about 50 years ago, I read and listened to the leaders of the early days. If you listen to any one of those leaders, the clarity with which they were able to identify the problems of Africa and the clarity with which they were able to prescribe the medicine that could solve the problems of Africa was as titillating as it was as astounding. You know, I listen to the more casual works and I read the casual works of a young leader in the 1980s, such as Thomas Sankara. You know, Thomas Sankara is a young individual whose claim to formal education was not very much. He did not hold any PhD. He was an army officer. He overthrows the government of Upper Volta, and he goes into government and poses the question, why are we called Upper Volta? And he says the first thing that we must do is to change the name of this country so that it becomes Burkina Faso, the land of the upright man, and that the people of this country must be called the Burkinabe, the upright people. And he says we have been suffering with hunger and food shortages for too long. We have depended on France for too long. We can no longer be children and toddlers in our adulthood. We cannot be in economic and political diapers for too long. And he begins to release the country. And no sooner has he succeeded in doing this than the erstwhile colonial power says that this is a bad example. And they eliminate him. And not only Thomas Sankara. I remember the man for whom I am named in 1961, Patrice Emery Lumumba, only age 36, and he recognizes, and on that day of independence, not being scheduled to speak, he speaks nevertheless, and he says how happy he is that the history of the Congolese will be written by the Congolese, and they take him away. I listened to Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah saying that Africa cannot be free unless the whole of it is free. I look at the casual works of Bantu Stephen Biko. I listen to the casual works of Samora Moises Machel. I read the casual works of Modibo Keita in Mali. I look at the works of Agostino Neto, the works of Africans who are clear. And those of you who are alive then, you could see that the indices of development in Africa were moving up north. If it was not infant mortality that was beginning to be lowered, it was maternal mortality and crude death rates. Africa was moving. But remember that Charles Darwin is still right. in this jungle that we call the world is survival of the fittest and the dying of the least suitable. When we begin to rise as a people, there are those whose only claim to success is to put us down, to tell us, not in so many words, that we are children of a lesser God. It is our duty to tell them that we are not. And that is why we have forums such as this. You know, there are those who may say, and I'm one of them, that perhaps in Africa we hold too many seminars, that we hold too many conferences, that we hold too many colloquia. But I hold the view that these things must be repeated time and time again, so that if they are clear, they become even clearer. Is it not true that gold must be in the fire and the furnace before it is refined? Is it not true that Africa has men and women, the 1.2 billion of us, that we have the ability to catapult this continent to a higher level? You know, there was a time that Africa deluded herself, that a leader was one in the nature of Moses, communing directly with God, and that this leader had a rod and staff, and that he would part the Red Sea of disease, and disease would disappear by a pronouncement of abracadabra. That this leader would call and summon manna from heaven, and manna would fall. No, that is not leadership. Leadership is all of us, each one of us, in our little villages. The great American Ralph Waldo Emerson was right when he said, when we want the world to be clean, don't complain about the dirt in the world. Sweep your front yard and let your neighbor sweep their front yard. And lo and behold, when we have all swept, the world will be clean. I'm now on a spiritual dimension. Mother Teresa was also right when she said, when you go into a room and you find that there is darkness, don't complain about the darkness. Take a candle, light your candle, let your neighbor light a candle, and light will conquer the darkness. You know, I've been asked to give a concluding keynote address, not to preach and pontificate. So I must now move to conclude. And in my conclusion, warning you as I do, that having sat next to a politician, when I say conclude, that is the beginning of the second phase of my speech. But let me conclude by saying the following things. That this continent is now at crossroads. And when you are at crossroads, it means that you are faced with two roads. And you've got to make a conscious decision which is the road to take. And I think Africa made this. In the year 2013, the African leaders, whether you like them or not, that is another debate. You elected them, or they happen to be the leaders, and therefore they are the political leaders. And it is important to make a distinction between leadership in its broad sense and political leadership. Political leadership is the most visible leadership and the most effective in terms of marshalling all our resources and ensuring that they are coordinated in a manner that benefits us all. That is why political leadership is at the very heart of human development. The politicians sat in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia and came up with Agenda 2063. You know, Agenda 2063 says many things, but this is how I imagine Africa Agenda 2063. That in the year 2063, South Africa will have a GDP of 3 trillion United States dollars. And at that time, we shall not be measuring our GDP in dollar terms. We shall be measuring our GDP in Afro terms. Our currency will be called Afro. And the Afro will be the strongest currency in the world. And the GDP of South Africa will be 3 trillion. That the per capita income of South Africa will be 30,000 Afro. and that all our children will go and gain education from primary to university, the cost being underwritten by our taxes, that all our minerals will have a value addition, that we shall no longer be importing complete products from China. There will be a mobile phone. Namibia will be manufacturing a mobile phone, and that 1 million Africans will be using that mobile phone. That phone will be called Mobi Africa. And Namibia will not stop there. I look to that day, Botswana will no longer be selling any cows to you.
A very good morning to you, and thank you very much for joining us this morning. That was just a clip of Professor PLO Lumumba on a certain conference he was speaking at across Africa. Indeed, he normally has a very powerful message for the continent of Africa, and he's a big Pan-African. My name is Miriam Mugutu, and this is Good Morning Africa, coming to you from Nairobi, the Kenya's capital city. It is just 27 minutes past 11 a.m., and I am glad that you could join us this morning. I'll start the first few minutes. I'll take you through what's happening in the continent this morning with the latest news headlines across states of Africa. And then Dr. Matanga will join me in a short while, and I will look at the NGOs and has corruption caused a state of despondency in Kenya, and the civil society in Kenya planning a state capture just like in Sudan. So that is something that Dr. Matanga will be engaging in when he joins me on set. And also yesterday, there's a damning report that was released by AfriCog and has indicted the state for being captured by systematic forces of corruption, leading to the theft of public resources. So just a bit on that report by AfriCog yesterday, and we'll look at that when Dr. Matanga join me as we look at the NGOs and their roles, and are they really involved in some of these state captures and also these regime changes that we see across Africa. There has been allegations, there has been a lot of things are being said about the intentions in some of these NGOs that operate across Africa, and the funding and the donors that actually the forces behind some of these NGOs. So that is something that we will look at when Dr. Matanga join me later on the set. But right now, let's just go straight to what is making news this morning in Africa. And I will start with Mauritius, where the United Nations has passed a resolution demanding the UK return control of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. In the non-binding vote in General Assembly in New York, 116 states were in favor and only 6 against. A major diplomatic blow to the UK, where 56 states, including France and Germany, abstained. And of course, Mauritius says it was forced to give up the Indian Ocean, a group now British overseas territory, in 1965 in exchange for its independence. And we go to Botswana, where the country has lifted a ban on elephant hunting, citing growing conflict between humans and animals, which at times destroy crops. Critics of the ban imposed in 2014 say this restriction was causing problems to small farmers and to those who previously benefited from hunting. Botswana has more than 130,000 elephants, the world's largest population. Now, the decision is likely to trigger an angry reaction from conservationists who believe the move is political. And in Mozambique, the United States has expressed its great disappointment with South Africa over its refusal to extradite Mozambique's former finance minister, Manuel Chang, to the country to stand trial on corruption charges. Mr. Chang was arrested in South Africa in December, and the request by the U.S., which accused him of carrying out a $2 billion fraud money laundering scheme and took advantage of the United States financial system and defrauded U.S. investors. And in Zimbabwe, 5 NGO workers in the country have been charged with plotting to overthrow the government. They appeared before a Harare magistrate where they were alleged to have received a training in the Maldives in acts of terrorism and civil disobedience. The state says they attended a workshop that was organized by a Serbian group. The 5 were arrested at Harare airport on their return, and the state believes they were trained to operate firearms and to mobilize citizens to turn against the government and evade arrest. And in the Central African Republic, more than 26 people have been killed in an attack by an armed group on 2 villages in the Central African Republic. The United Nations peacekeeping mission in the country has confirmed the attack took place in the villages of Kongili and Jojoma. The head of the mission, Makwer Ndiane, said on a tweet on Wednesday. And the Democratic Republic of Congo intelligence chiefs from the Great Lakes region say the Islamic State, ISIS, group is taking advantage of insecurity in the eastern parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo to set up base in the country. The intelligence chiefs are currently meeting in Uganda, where they are expected to draw up a strategy against the jihadist group and other militants in the region. The east of DR Congo is plagued by scores of militia groups and lacks a strong government presence. In Somalia, a former Somali Foreign Minister Hussein Elabe Fahie is among 5 people killed by a car bomb in the capital Mogadishu, the country's information minister has confirmed. Mr. Fahie had served under the former Prime Minister Ali Mohamed Kedi in 2007. The blast struck a convoy escorting officials and lawmakers to the presidential palace, the AFP news agencies have reported. In Malawi, Martin Fayulu, a defeated presidential aspirant in the Democratic Republic of Congo's December 2018 elections, has commented on the ongoing electoral process in Malawi, calling for vigilance and protection of votes. In a tweet posted a day after Malawians went to the polls to elect a president, lawmakers and local level officials, Fayulu cautioned against any meddling with true figures from the polling stations. And still in Malawi, Malawi's Electoral Commission, MEC, Dr. Jane Ansah, has called upon stakeholders, including political parties, to refrain from announcing premature results, pledging that the Commission will start official declaration of results as soon as 20% of votes cast have been tallied. And in South Africa, the country's parliament duly elected the ruling African National Congress, Cyril Ramaphosa, to retain the office of the president. Ramaphosa was widely expected to retain the seat as president by the 400 lawmakers in Parliament and National Assembly Law House who voted for him, and his party holds the majority. He will be inaugurated this coming Saturday. And in Somalia and Kenya, the Somali government has officially responded to the latest installment of Kenyan pressure in the midst of a rolling diplomatic row over the maritime boundaries. Earlier this week, Somali government officials, a minister and 2 senators were denied entry in Kenya despite presenting diplomatic passports at the airport. They were traveling to Nairobi for official duty. The trio are reported to have been detained at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport and forced to return to Mogadishu. Before this incident, Kenya ordered mandatory 2-tier checks for persons traveling from Mogadishu to Nairobi. And in Libya, the Libyan strongman Khalifa Haftar, who is leading a military offensive against the United Nations-recognized government in Tripoli, rejected a ceasefire requested by French President Emmanuel Macron during talks in Paris. The official newspaper there has reported Haftar said the conditions for halting hostilities were not met, while acknowledging that a political dialogue is needed to end the standoff with his rival Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj, the official said, on condition of anonymity. And in South Sudan, the Army General Headquarters has announced that the SPLA Day celebration, which was adjourned last week, will be celebrated today. On Monday, 1983, a group of mountaineers from Malwal Chat Army Garrison in Bor opened a fire on their Sudanese counterparts, sparking the outbreak of conflict in Ayod, Bipor, and other parts of the then southern Sudan. Later on, these mutineers would form the core of SPLA, and they are all honored on May 16th every year. However, the celebrations were adjourned to today because the government was not prepared enough. And in Kenya, Kenyan ambassador to Tanzania, Dr. Dan Kazungu, is on the spot for endorsing a local farm that took John Magufuli's government for a ride in a 18 billion Kenya shillings cashew nut deal. On Monday, the Tanzanian parliament was told that Mr. Kazungu gave Indo Power Solutions a clean bill of health to buy 100,000 tons of the nuts. A Tanzanian Trade and Industries Minister Joseph Kakunda said there were no exchange of communication between Tanzania government, Tanzanian embassy in Kenya, and the Kenyan embassy in Tanzania before the deal, which flopped and was signed on January 30th. And still we end with Kenya, where Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission detectives investigating allegations of graft in Kiambu County government on Thursday morning raided Nairobi and Kiambu homes of Governor Ferdinand Waititu. The officers went to Waititu's homes in Runda, Kiambu, and Garden Estate, where they ransacked with them and came out with some documents. The officers also said they will later take Governor and his wife and daughter to Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission offices at Integrity Center for questioning over claims of allegation. Waititu was at his Runda home when the team pounced. Officials said apart from Waititu, 15 other county officials are targeted for the same. So that is the latest from Africa this morning. Thank you so much for joining. This is Good Morning Africa, and thank you so much for writing to us this morning, and also for engaging with us. Dr. Matsang will be joining me later, just in a short while, and I will be looking at of course, state capture by the NGOs. Has corruption caused the state of despondency in Kenya, and the civil society in Kenya planning a state capture like in Sudan? And remember, this comes in a backdrop of a very damning report that was released yesterday by AfriCog that says that indicted the state for being captured by systematic forces of corruption, leading to theft of public resources. And of course, the Africa Center for Open Governance, that is AfriCog, yesterday released a report in Nairobi saying that the elites and private interests are calling the shots, and it appears as though President Uhuru Kenyatta is not really in control of this country. This is according to the AfriCog report, and the elites and the private interests are actually calling the shots and running this country. And in that report, they're saying state capture, considered one of the most pervasive and harmful forms of corruption, refers to a situation, of course, where a powerful individuals, institutions, companies, or groups within or outside the country use corruption to shape a nation's policies, legal environment, and economy to benefit their own private interests. So that, in a nutshell, is a definition of a state capture. But according to the AfriCog findings, it suggests that the vice is systematically planned across many institutions, and the denials and inaction by the government mean ordinary Kenyans bear the brunt, of course. And so this is a very interesting conversation that I'll be seeking to get a few answers from, and converse with Dr. Matsanga joins me here, of course. Even as we look at NGOs, have they captured, has the state been captured by NGOs? Has corruption caused the state of despondency in Kenya? And civil society in Kenya, are they planning to capture the state like they did in Sudan? That is the topic, and Dr. Matsanga will be engaging in that. But when you just in a retrospect, you look at what has been happening in Kenya since the time of Goldenberg, of course, Anglo-Leasing, Eurobond. These are mega scandals that involved a lot of money, and state capture scandals whose investigations have, over the years, this is according to AfriCog report, become a routine circus because of collusion, fightbacks, and endless legal maneuvers. And I think every Kenyan out there watching right now will agree to some parts of that statement. So we'll talk about that when Doctor joins the set, and of course the sabotage that comes with that. I'd like to get his thoughts on that. And also part of that report explains other forms of state capture. And so even as we look at the role that the NGOs play when it comes to, advancing some things that might harm the state, I think also because nobody else can really do such a work and a report and, bring out. Sometimes it takes the NGO to see, okay, fine, so this is what they're saying, but what is really happening? You have something to compare and contrast with when it comes to governance in a country. And I think NGOs plays a lot of a role and a very vital role sometimes when it comes to giving us the real picture on what is really happening and the real situation when it comes to the governance of a country. Sometimes it might be misplaced, but a lot of times it has some truth in it. And so we will talk about that when Dr. returns. But right now, let's just go through some of the news-making headlines. I just read some news from different African countries this morning, and of course I started with Mauritius, where now the United Nations has passed a resolution demanding the UK return control of Chagos Islands to Mauritius. So apparently when the UK was allowing Mauritius to have its independence, was handing over Mauritius its independence in 1965, part of that deal was that the UK was going to have control of the Chagos Islands, and they were using it in terms for defense and for defense purposes. But it appears long after that now that reason does not hold anymore. It has become null and void. And so Mauritius had petitioned for them to get these islands back to them. And so when they petitioned the United Nations Assembly, and yesterday the members got to vote, and it received a backing by 116 states. And of course, some members did not vote, but yes, and only 6 against, and that included a country like France, Germany, France and Germany abstained, but only 6 countries voted against, but 116 states voted to have the Chagos Islands returned to Mauritius by the United Kingdom. And so I believe they will do that. That is something that has been gaining momentum since end of last year. And I think I read one of the news earlier this year when the Mauritius had gone to the UK to petition the same. So now they get a hold of the Chagos Islands and get a control of that, and that will be backed and part of Mauritius as a country, because it was still as though since 1965, after the independence, it's like the UK still ruled and owned part of that, the Chagos Islands. They're the one in charge, but right now it has been returned back to Mauritius. This is after the popular vote and the majority and 116 states voting to have the Chagos Islands returned to Mauritius. And also, Botswana right now has lifted a ban on elephant, hunting. There was a ban in elephant hunting in, I think, across Africa, but Botswana seems to have lifted that now. And, Botswana has like 130,000 elephants population in the world. It's actually leading with the number of elephant population. It has the largest in the world. And so it appears, poaching helps to, contain the number. I don't understand why, but they've lifted that ban. And this, of course, is a decision that is likely to trigger a lot of reaction and angry reaction, especially from animal lovers and conservationists who believe that the move is political. And so that is a developing story, and we will let you know what really happens after that decision was made by the Botswana government. We'll let you know how that story develops. Bidal Losaluba, you're saying it's just strange the government is not able to celebrate a national day due to lack of preparedness. I think you're referring to the story that I just did on South Sudan. Yes, and I will talk about that in a bit. And Abdulaziz Ahmed, you're saying we can see Kenyan is underestimating the federal government of Somalia, but we taught Kenyan some diplomatic lesson in March of this year. All right, I think you're referring to the diplomatic crowd that still continues. It's now turning into what, a Cold War? I don't know, but it's between Kenya and Somalia. I had that in the news as well, and so yes, so Bidal Lo Sauba, you just touched on that story from South Sudan. Let me just look for it, and then we can talk about it, or you can tell me what you know. Because South Sudan was unable to hold its, yes, here it is. Now, of course, the Army General Headquarters has announced that the SPLA Day celebration, which was adjourned from last week, which on May 16th, be celebrated today. Now, for those who don't know, on May 16th, 1983, a group of mutineers from Maluol Chad Army Garrison in Bor opened fire on their Sudanese counterparts, sparking the outbreak of conflict in Ayod, Bipor, and other parts of then southern Sudan. And later, these mutineers would form the core of SPLA, and they are honored on May 16th every year. So now listen, this year it was not. It could not happen on the day, on 16th May, reasons being the government said it was not prepared. But also, Bidal Las Saluba, it will be important to remember that South Sudan right now is going through so much in terms of finance. And of course, the other day when we were talking about what's really happening in South Sudan and the peace deal and all that, and we mentioned the financial problems that South Sudan is facing right now. And a lot of South Sudanese, a good number of them came and said, no, how can a country that, has oil running through its pipe 24 hours a day, that is 24 hours, say they're broke. But the government is shutting down 39 of their embassies across the world, because they're not able to maintain that. And remember, just a few days before they did that was on Monday, I think they did that last week, the government sacked about 40 of its diplomats from across the world, because apparently they have not been showing up to work. Others for months, others for years. They've not been showing up to their offices in the different countries that they were deployed to represent South Sudan's interest in those countries. And so now that the embassies are closing down, maybe even the diplomats are not being paid. That could be one of the reasons why there was what seemed like a ghost load. They're not really showing up in their offices. So now when you look at that and their lack of preparedness for the May 16th SPLA Day commemoration or celebration, then you'll understand that there's a possibility that maybe the government or maybe had even issues with money when it comes to planning of the celebrations or remembrance of this day. So that is just my theory. From what the information we have about the problems South Sudan government is having right now. And of course, the state of insecurity and, the peace process. There has been so much happening in South Sudan. So those could also be other reasons. But I believe perhaps that's just my theory. There's not been, the official government position was they were not prepared. So in that lack of preparedness, we do not know the components. We do not know really which part they were not prepared. Was it the lack of money? Was it the lack of, what was it? They did not make it very clear. But they said they were not prepared. But however, the celebrations will happen today. So they were adjourned from May 16th, and the celebrations will take place today in Juba, I believe. And they'll be honoring the SPLA mutineers, that sparked the war in 1983 between the used to be Southern Sudan and the rest. I think that's where that must have, started the calls for secession, I believe. And so that is the day that war started, and they opened fire on the army from the Bor garrison, started fire the rest of Sudan, I think northern Sudan. And so that must have been the start of what will follow a very long civil war that led to secession of South Sudan. But so that day was on May 16th, at the beginning of that. So it's normally marked in the calendar of South Sudan. It's a very important day, especially for SPLA. So it is happening today. So hopefully there will be some news that probably will bring some hope for South Sudanese who right now are very worried with the shaky peace agreement, with a gloomy future, because we really don't know if the 6 months that the government and the side of Dr. Machar was given, the 6 months that they asked for, if it will be enough for them to have ironed out these issues that really are making the other side not be very trusting, especially Dr. Machar's side, not to be very trusting towards President, Salva Kiir's government, and that has made him to hesitate even coming back to Juba. And his security is paramount and is something that he's really worrying about. And here you said it over and over that maybe what they need is, like a third party buffer that acts as protection for the opposition, not really, yes, for Riek Machar and his team when they come to Juba. And this will be a person who is not taking any sides, and probably this could assure Dr. Machar of his security when he returns to Juba, because he said he from what happened in 2016 when he attempted to come back, he's really not buying into this new, because President Kiir has since tried to, extend a friendship hand towards Dr. Machar and asking him to return to Juba so that they can start the implementation of the process that finally will culminate in finding a unity government. But he has been very hesitant to return, and for good reasons. If you look at back what happened in 2016, then you would realize that actually his fears are actually founded. So with this government saying they were not prepared for the May 16th day to celebrate and honor, the SPLA that day, then it's I think it's understandable. And yes, unless maybe there's something else that made the government not to, you can tell me. And just reading some of your comments here. Gorang Akon Aguekio saying no one should be killing our animals in our content at all. Oh yeah, that story from Botswana. Oh, okay. And Chimara Emeka, you're saying, I hope Nigeria is still part of Africa. People are dying every day in Nigeria, but Fulanis, herdsmen, and Boko Haram talk about Nigeria. All right, I think you're referring to people from Biafra land that, even yesterday, we received some reports of some people being killed in Biafra land, and the other day when we were talking about why has the world forgotten about what's happening in Biafra, and why is Africa leadership especially not talking about it? And why did it not feature on the 32nd summit of the AU earlier this year? Thank you. And in case there's any developing story from that side of the world, please share with me in the comment section, and our viewers will be happy to receive that information. And Nick Chukwueze, you're saying Nigeria army is killing people of Biafra. Please, we need help. They are killing us. Okay. I think the same worrying information and news from Biafra. Please keep writing to us and tell us if there's incidences that has happened since yesterday that we need to know of. Please share with us. And even guys from Ambazonia, I think there's a clip that we received from Ambazonia that I'll be playing a bit later. It was very sad. A mother lost her child and a baby was killed. It's very saddening and very heartbreaking. So we'll just play that later. So even in Ambazonia, if you're watching us from there, and there's any information or any news and developing story that is happening from there, please share with us. And we'll share with the rest of the world, of course. This is the first part of Good Morning Africa. Dr. Matanga will be joining me a bit later, and we'll look at the NGOs and the role they play in terms of some of this, even things we see happening in Africa, and we'll look at has corruption caused the state of despondency in Kenya, and the civil society in Kenya planning a state capture like in South Sudan. That is something that Dr. Matanga will be looking at when he joins me on set in a very short while. But before that, let me just read through your comments. And Garang Akona Gwek, you're saying, we still should celebrate May 16th, always on time, no matter what is going on, because we have lost a lot of people in the country. Yes, those are your sentiments. And Chimara Emeka, Fulanis is taking over Nigeria, killings every day. In Nigeria, people are dying daily. All right. Okay, so keep writing. And Ahmed Omda, you're saying we talk about Sudan. There's a news that came through early in the morning. I don't know if I'll get the details and the facts right, but if I don't, please correct me. About a certain person, is it an army guy who used to work in the government of the former President Omar al-Bashir, and the prosecutors want him to go to court and answer to charges because he was responsible for a lot of killings that was happening in Sudan. And there are soldiers who are actually guarding him and have refused for the other side to get in and get him and take him to the court. So they are actually protecting him. So tell me if that is true. But I think I read it on BBC, so that must have some truth. But I entirely don't have the story straight, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but that is what is the latest that is happening in Sudan. And of course, the peace process that is now, it's even difficult to say. Remember, last week the army had called off the talks for 72 hours, and they wanted the protesters to get off the barricades from the streets and access to especially the army headquarters. And they got to do that, I believe. And now they said that was the condition before they would resume talks after 72 hours. So the talks resumed, and they all agreed for a transition period of 3 years. And then after that, now the details, the nitty-gritties, they seems not to be agreeing on that, and how from now till the end of the 3 years, the transition period, what will entail this, the leadership of Sudan? How will it even be? Will it be entirely on the military? Because the composition right now, the military wanted to have more people in the committee, and the civilians were not agreeing to that. And have they agreed in terms of the components of the constitution? Remember, right now, Sudan's constitution has been suspended, and the army wanted sort of an Islamic state. They wanted Sharia law to form the basis of Sudan's constitution, and the protesters and the civil society said no, we want a constitution that is all inclusive. And so it's a lot that I think they're grappling with. The nitty-gritties they're not agreeing with, but also very pertinent in terms of seeing a new future for Sudan, or a new Sudan, as it was 30 years when Omar al-Bashir was in power. So this is a new dawn for Sudan. So I hope they get it right. I hope in the struggle back and forth, they are doing it for the greater good of a future Sudan that everybody will be happy to be part of and be proud of. And even us as Africa, when you hear such a thing, in another country, you worry, because we're normally very you don't want another war to break, in another African country, because we're very prone to that. So we're just praying and hoping that they get to agree and everything works out for the better good of the Sudan and the future generations that will come after them. And so Khalid Mohammed, you're saying great job, and great job to you. And Anselmo Ayebochi Odowele, you're saying the problems of Nigeria has non-solutions, only referendum. So you're saying referendum to secede from the greater Nigeria. You want to have your own Biafra land. Okay, I get that. And Thomas Mako, you're saying, dear Matanga, thank you for caring for the children of God, the Biafrans. Don't be afraid. Your job is heavenly. Oh, that's very lovely. I think I read it to him when he joins me on set. Thank you so much. Anyway, keep writing, and please let me know what else is happening out there. I might not have gotten all the countries and all the news that is happening. And remember, Malawi, they went for the elections on Tuesday, and right now there's still 20% of the votes that are remaining are still getting tallied. And so Malawi's Electoral Commission's chief, Dr. Jane Ansah, came out and has called upon stakeholders, including political parties, to refrain from announcing premature results, pledging that the commission will start official celebrations of declaration of results as soon as the 20% of the cast vote have completely been tallied. And in a very interesting twist of events, remember the opposition leader of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mr. Martin Fayulu, now came out yesterday, and he asked the Malawians to be very vigilant and to protect their votes. And in a tweet posted a day after Malawians went to the polls to elect a president, lawmakers and local level officials, Fayulu cautioned against any meddling with true figures from the polling stations. So this is Fayulu from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And he's tweeting on about the happenings and the just concluded elections in Malawi. I think probably from his own script, because until now he's not really agreed that President Felix Tshisekedi won. He feels that he was cheated out of his win, and by the dear Cheney, electoral commission there. And so he's not settled. Actually, he tried planning for some protests earlier, just after the elections. Didn't work. I don't know if he went to court to petition it. It's not very clear, but he's not been satisfied by the manner in which the elections happened. And remember, elections in the DRC happened on the 30th of December last year, 2 years after they were supposed to have happened. That was in 2016. But President Joseph Kabila then kept postponing them. So they finally happened last year, December 30th. And Mr. Martin Fayulu was projected to win, and even just before the elections were released, he was very confident that he was going to win, and even a country like France came out, I think, was supporting him. The Catholic Church, which has a very vital role and a vital place in the DRC, also came to say that Fayulu actually was standing a better chance of winning from whatever reports that they had from their people they had put in ground. But after a few days of confusion and here and there, the Electoral Commission, the DRC, came out and declared the now President Felix Tshisekedi to have won the elections. And of course, now they merged together and working with the party of former President Joseph Kabila. And that Mr. Fayulu, who is now the official opposition leader in the DRC, did not receive very kindly. So now he tweeted for the people of Malawi and telling them to be vigilant and to protect their votes. I don't know in layman term what that will mean, because in Kenya, when the opposition leader, who now, after the handshake, seems to be working with the government, if he would make such a pronouncement, then his supporters will receive it in a very literal way, to literally go there and guard and protect. So those are very, serious sentiments that Mr. Martin Fayulu there tweeted. So I hope the Malawians would not take that very literally. So right now, I'd like to take a very short break. And when I return, we look at the rest of the news making headlines in Africa and what we have as our main topic of the day. So please do not go very far, because Dr. Matanga will be joining me on set, and we will dissect what is happening. And also in India, I hear the President Modi is leading right now, and he is projected to be winning the elections. The votes are they're almost finishing with the counting, and he seems to be on the lead as it is right now. And of course, in the UK, Theresa May is having her problems with Brexit, and the EU, they're going on Monday. I think they're voting for their representatives in the European Union Parliament. So it's a lot, even global news. Just share with us, and we will talk about it as we proceed with the show. But right now, I'll take a very short break. Please don't go too far. Good morning, Africa. We'll be right back.
This is Muyoka, southwest region of Cameroon. Over 24 hours after the shooting to death of a 4-month-old baby called Neba Martha Mbu, the mother, Emilia Agbo, remains unconsolable. The father points accusing fingers on the Cameroonian military for killing his child.
In the morning, there was a gunshot. The convoys were going to Kumba. Unfortunately, they returned back. They still shoot by 2 o'clock. So by that 2 o'clock, they shoot right after where was passing. And unfortunately, they returned back now. They came inside the quarter and they started shooting. They surprised all of us. My wife was behind the house preparing food. So she placed the child on top of the chair. So as the child was sleeping, I was in front of the door.
Today for morning time, motor interfere will run. We'll go hide.
In the afternoon, a military vehicle came to the quarter. We ran for safety. They broke the door and shot the child. Here are the bullets we discovered after their departure.
Don't enter. Come on now, run enter the room.
To a neighbor watching the military men as they returned after the incident attests that some of them blamed their colleague for shooting a baby.
try for quarrel within themselves why you shoot that kind of thing for that age. They try for exchange where they get a big quarrel among them. Why you shoot that kind of people that age? Why they shoot that people that kind of age?
They talk and say wait for French.
They say pourquoi tu tires le petit fille là? Pourquoi tu tires ça?
Little neighbor Martha Mbu shot dead and buried.
The inhabitants of this particular village, Muyoka, in the southwest region of the country, explained that the baby, Martha, that is 4 months, was lying in this particular spot, at this particular spot before suspected military men entered the house and broke the door, shooting her several times on the head. Some of them who witnessed the incident through a hideout indicated that the military man shot bullets around the house before shooting the little girl.
Now childless, Emilia Agbo, in agony and pains, packaged the dresses of her late baby. Few inhabitants of Muyoka regrets permanent attacks on both sides of the war.
My great friends and other people who are sitting here, who are standing to see, observe what has happened. We should pray that God should give us some enormous time to come together and live, like to bring the words of God beside us.
The parents, while grieving the death of their only child, have turned down a convocation by security forces Muyoka to present a statement of what took place.
This is the particular building where inhabitants of Makanga 1, a neighborhood in Muyoka, in the southwest region of the country, say the 4-month-old child was shot here. That was on the 20th of May, the day the government of Cameroon was celebrating the National Day of this country. They indicated that several military men invaded this neighborhood, shooting indiscriminately. The parents of the child, 4 months, ran away, leaving the child behind when military men entered there, shooting her several times. Dominic Memenwa Kimo, reporting from Muyoka, Okanato English.
Welcome back, viewers. Thank you very much. This is the second part of our broadcast, and in this second part of the broadcast, I will deal with one issue or two issues regarding the Republic of Kenya, the capture of the state by NGOs, the planning, the logistics by NGOs to create a state of despondency in this East African state. First, I would like to take this opportunity to tell the world that the wave of regime change and the wave of an uprising has been sponsored on the people of Africa. Second, it is now very, very clear that all the things that are happening in Africa are happening as a result of the disturbances that have been orchestrated, planned, and equipped and supplied from using military coups to using NGOs to overthrow governments in Africa. All the way where the regime change started in Tunisia, Algeria, swept into Egypt, Cairo, the pattern is the same, and it has always been the same up to today. It is therefore very, very important to be frank and candid that what is happening in Kenya today is very, very interesting. Yesterday, AFRICOG, which is one of the main NGOs of civil society group that has been at the forefront first from 2008, 2009, 2007, it helped to collect evidence, helped the ICC to collect evidence against the state of, and some people within the state of Republic of Kenya. This help has been extended to actually coaching witnesses, facilitating witnesses, writing statements for witnesses, earmarking witnesses. So the background of NGO and the civil society in Kenya is not rosy. They have not been riding on a rosy back of any situation that we can accomplish, give them compliments. The NGOs in Kenya seem to be NGOs that are more concerned with money and money picking than solving the problem of civic education. The NGOs in Kenya, especially the one headed by Madam Gladwell Otieno, has been political. NGOs are not supposed to be political. They are supposed to be non-government. They don't take part in political circus of the government. They preserve human rights. But are the Kenyan NGOs preserving human rights? Are they talking about human rights, or they are talking more of politics? Are they part of the political opposition that we see that is building slowly as a result and a notion of the corruption scandals that are here in this country? Viewers, the state capture considered as one of the most pervasive, harmful forms of corruption by the NGOs themselves. Most of these NGOs in Africa are not accountable. To whom do they give their accounts? Do they publish their accounts? Do they verify their accounts? Who verifies the accounts of the NGOs in Africa? Who has tried to find out what they do and what they have accomplished or not? These are the stories that I want us to go through slowly. There are major scandals, of course, in Kenya, but the scandals also need civic education. We cannot eradicate corruption alone without the civic education, without the change of the laws. The laws that govern the corruptions, cases in Kenya is weak. The NGOs should come out with solutions by writing the proper laws. These lawyers who are in one group called AFRICOG should write better laws that can now change, arrest, detain, and recover the assets of the people of Kenya that were stolen by a few people who go on stealing our assets, or the assets of the people of Kenya. Therefore, a regime change comes as a result of frustrations, despondency. A state of despondency seems to have been created in Kenya. First, people created apathy. They created phantom accounts that keep on hitting the head of state on a daily basis. Second, they created phantom accounts that point at the president as a person not functioning. Second, the third one is they started opposing what the president was trying to do in appointments of various institutions of DCI, DPP. Many of the NGOs sat back and watched this drama goes on. They have never put an input. When you ask them for input, they only come too late and serve very little. This is the tragedy of Africa. The tragedy of Africa is we are tribalistically arranged. Ethnicity has destroyed Africa. If you look at the way things are happening in most of the African states, you will find that people are driven on ethnicity. I was listening to Miriam when she was talking about South Sudan missing celebrations for their independence. And one person was asking, why are we missing independence? Ethnicity. The civic education in South Sudan is not adequate, just as it is in Kenya, is not adequate enough for people to understand that elections, corruption can be healed by people educating other people not to be corrupt. Corruption in Kenya is in structures, institutions. It has been institutionalized. There are people who actually do purely nothing, but to find out what it is that they can sell or trade with the government fictitiously to obtain money. How do we get rid of this culture? Before we jump to the question of capturing the state through demonstrations on the streets of Nairobi, the people of Khartoum, again I was listening to Miriam when I watched her speak about people wanting Sharia law versus a universal system where there is no Sharia law. That will bring a problem. These are some of the problems that people who want to demonstrate on the streets should have been prepared for. If you look at the way things are going in Sudan, it will end up the Libyan way. And the people will end up killing each other, maiming each other, because some people don't want a religious fanatic nation ruled on Islamic Sharia law. We have those problems. Africa has those problems. Kenya has those problems. The fight against the NGO taking foothold, instead of them doing Inuka Kenya. For example, you only see Inuka Kenya at the election time of Mr. Juviongo, but is getting money to do some particular civic work. How many of you have been actually helped? How many students have been helped to attain reading skills? Because Inuka means to uplift. How many people have been uplifted in Kenya because Jithongo is teaching them how to uplift their lives economically? These are the questions that we want to ask. And this is exactly where this, from now onwards, the war is centered on those NGOs that want to capture the state power in Kenya. It is not a lie that there is no such motives. If you look at what is happening across Southern Africa and the entire East and the Central Africa, then you look at what is happening in North Africa, in Khartoum, for example, you see a regime change. You see the symptoms of regime change. These symptoms are showing us a direction where things are going. Therefore, I want to take this opportunity to thank you very much for knowing that there is and there will be and there are people planning to capture the state. It is not only in Kenya, it is everywhere in Africa. As Miriam rightly said, many African countries should get worried. They don't know who is coming with it, how it will come, how it will arrive. We don't know. But our role is to expose who is bankrolling these guys, who gives them money, the impetus to come and kill, to make demonstrations, to prepare for demonstrations. Logistically, if you look at what is happening in so many of these countries across the world, you'll see that there is a new crop. In Europe, we have ultranationalism growing, wanting every person who is not a European to quit Europe. You can see ultranationalist parties springing up in Europe. Everywhere in Europe, you have ultranational parties. They are springing up, they are usurping power, they are winning elections. Can Africa think of stabilizing itself, remaining on course, working for this continent, working for the people, for the citizens, such that we are not swept by such ultra-nationalistic vices or vices that bring tribal sentiments and the conflict, so that Africa remains a conflict zone throughout. In this situation, we shall look at sabotage. Is there intended sabotage? President Uhuru Kenyatta's war on corruption has been sabotaged It has been sabotaged by very many people who have not wanted him to succeed on the question of corruption. Today, as we speak, we have not got a landmark case that goes against all those, and the billions of shillings have disappeared. There is a dilly-dally situation when we come to prosecuting. The judges on one side are also captured already. You remember the civil society in Kenya captured the judiciary a long time ago. It came up with a decision in 2017 that angered many Kenyans and left Kenyans almost to a fighting ground where they were going to kill each other. It is therefore very, very important for the people of Africa to understand, the people of Kenya to understand that planning of a regime change has, and it is, we know it. We know the planners, we know the sponsors, we know the fundraisers. Those fundraisers are causing trouble. The people who don't want a handshake, the people who would not like to touch anything to do with a handshake. These people do exist. And when you see people not wanting a handshake, they would want chaos on the streets. Then you know there is something that is not very good for the people of Kenya. When you look at forms of state capture, you look at how yesterday this conference was stage managed. Mr. Ouko, who has only 5 months to go, has nothing to tell us, nothing to worry about. He says there is a state capture coming. There is money that was lost. There are every places. As we see, most of the governors, devolution has worked so well. But devolution with corruption will spark a revolution. This is exactly what the Auditor General should have actually recommended. How do we stop people who were empowered to write their budgets and they write budgets in a different way? How do you explain 700 million gone missing and there is nothing that you can talk about? It is not there. So, in a nutshell, there are so many scandals that can lead to what we call regime change, and the war against graft has been too activity driven and has become a tool of resolving Jubilee's internal problems. This is Wachira, a man who has never believed in Jubilee, a man who never likes Kenyatta, a man who never talks well about the Jubilee Party. What does he want to achieve? He wants to achieve an age so that Jubilee disintegrates, the government disintegrates, then the civil society comes in to take its position. Viewers, let's take a break, and when we come back, together with Miriam, we shall interrogate the issues and the other African news. I see in Malawi, the progress seems to be going on 20%, but it doesn't look that 20% is left when you have already transmitted the same effectively. 3 days past the declaration day, I think we have a problem. Let's expect one flowing on the streets very shortly. When we come back, we want to look at the impact of regime change on African countries. Have we created a state of despondency? Are NGOs creating a state of despondency in Kenya in order to capture the state? That is the question at the center of our discussion this afternoon. We discuss Africa. We see what ails Africa. And today, this afternoon, we want to see whether Sudan will permanently remain a sick child of Africa. A permanent. Can we resolve the issues of Southern Sudan? Is it something that has gone wrong for 200 years? There has always been a problem in Southern Sudan, in that great region, starting from all the way the Alimadi Wars and the rest of all what happened until today. Peace seems to be elusive. Why has UN taken slow action? Why hasn't UN set up a tribunal? We want to see a tribunal that will make sure that Southern Sudan people are accountable. Those who committed crimes against the human beings. 20,000 Sudanese perished. They are perished. They are not accountable. Nobody can account for them. And we cannot sit here, go on hammering peace agreements without mechanisms of accountability. If we set a tribunal for Sierra Leone, for Rwanda, for Camera Rouge, we need somebody to stand up for our masses, the masses that have died, the masses that continue to die, the masses that are being brutalized, murdered, maimed on a daily basis by marauding armies of both Riek Machar and Salva Kiir. There must be an accountability. You are not going to sit here and tell people there is no accountability in Southern Sudan. There must be a tribunal. Why do we run to harass countries of Kenya, put ICC on Kenya, put ICC on this country, put ICC on Central African Republic? Why have we delayed on putting a tribunal for Southern Sudan to find out who is killing, who has been killing, how they have been killing people? Let me speak for the people in Southern Sudan, the women, the children who have not gone to school, the children who have no medicine, the children who have nothing, who have been running since 2013, and the war cannot end because of two people. Let them face the tribunal. I'm not going to keep quiet as a Pan-African to see Southern Sudan being maimed, being tortured, being cut, dismembered. And we keep quiet and watch people vote images of people, of malcontents singing to us in Uganda, in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in South Africa, telling us they have money. Let them face the international tribunal and tell the tribunal who gave them the guns, where they buying them, how they were killing people. Enough of is enough. Enough is enough for Africa. We have had enough. There is no need of that anymore. Enough is enough. And if people have died, they will not cry. We people who are left on planet Earth must cry for them. We must find justice for them. We must make sure that there are leaders who go on bragging on television stations all over the world, who are accountable. They must be behind bars. Thank you very much. Welcome back. I'm joined now by Miriam. She is going to ask me many questions, as you also ask as many questions as possible on the question of the first topic, the second topic. That video in Cameroon is very worrying. Mm-hmm. The regime change in Kenya or in Africa, what is it? A state capture, is it taking place? Why do NGOs want to capture the state? What has the state done wrong? Who is funding them to capture this state? Mm-hmm. I think we should be very, very careful that this is not fiction. If you look at the speakers yesterday lined up, all of them were pointing at one thing. Unless President Uhuru Kenyatta strikes a balance and takes on the cartels, brings down corruption, something is not right. Am I wrong, Miriam?
from what I gathered yesterday, they're giving a report about the state of corruption and how it has captured the country. That is what I gathered from the meeting they had. And as much as I think there's some contention when it comes to the NGOs, not just in Kenya but across the world. But I think there's some points they raised that I found to be legitimate, especially in the Kenyan atmosphere. So maybe you'll respond to that. And I just noted a few. And they were saying that the document, when they were speaking, they were saying that the state has succeeded in the art of speaking against corruption while endorsing it behind the scenes. How would you respond to that in regards to, say, the vice president? Because he is part of the leadership of this country. Is the government doing enough in fight against corruption? That is what they were trying to challenge.
The government has done quite a lot. President Uhuru Kenyatta has invested in the corruption menace. He has put safeguards. He's changed officials. He's removed some officials. He has transferred officials. Now, if you look at the rate at which previous corruption scandals were investigated and look at the one of today, there is a slight serious movement towards the direction. But when it comes to deceit, the back, door operations of attacking the DCI, there are certain special groups in this country that are specialists in tactics of stealing, then concealing. For example, all this, right from scandal 1 up to today, the main person behind all this is one. There's one person mentioned by almost suspects everywhere. There are institutions. They are in these interrogation cells. If you look at the notes, where did you take the money? Privately, the DCI knows the person, knows the people. But the truth is that the NGOs brought out something to say, after knowing what next, the government is not keeping quiet and not working out methods that will amicably make sure that this country does not split because of corruption. I believe the government somewhere is making measures, taking precautions, that when they strike at a certain moment, there will be no split, no backlash. Because they know. I believe President Uhuru Kenyatta knows all these people who steal this money. Deep down in his heart, in his state house, he knows.
And why is it?
They are the NGOs.
Yes.
They are the NGOs had a point that it is some people even try to politicize it. But it takes a step. You look at a bigger picture. What will a drop in the ocean manufacture? Will it infect everybody? How do waves, when you draw a stone in the sea, in quiet water, how do waves go? They go like this. Will it affect everybody? So those are some of the measures the government is putting in place to make sure that first, there could be no repercussions. So when they come to strike, to take you, or to take me, or to take anybody, nobody else will come up to say, So that is, I think, in the mind of President Uhuru Kenyatta, when he said, let's prepare for tougher times to come.
And I think it's the art of speaking. They're saying it's very good in speaking, but very slow action is being taken. And I think Kenyans will agree with part of that statement. Today in the morning, they took, I think Waititu is at the EACC. I've not seen anybody from Kikuyu coming out and saying they're being targeted. So I believe if the president today decided to strike on corruption, and and it's for the good of Kenyans. I think we have to look for the greater good of Kenyans and not just an individual. And I think the government is, according to this report, is failing in that. And there's also something they said here. I'll just from the experts of that, because I read the report in the morning. And they're saying they cited the Golden Bag, Anglo Leasing, Eurobond, and some of the mega state capture scandals whose investigations have over the years become a routine circus because of the collusion, fightbacks, and endless legal maneuvers. And it's like some of these things are being protected by the state. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I will answer not as a state, but as a person who would know what can be done and not to be done. Because these questions are actually squarely in the hands of the government spokesman.
Yes.
No, the government spokesman.
We have a new one now.
A new one who has just addressed a conference.
We should get him here.
Yes.
Yes.
He will. He is my friend.
Yes.
Cyrus is my friend. I will call him here so that we take one show to the digital platformers. The problem here is, it is true, kickbacks, legal obstacles, lawyers gaining out of this money. There are many. It's true. There are many people. You have seen the type of lawyers who have even fictitiously represented the people, clients who never told them to represent them. So we have a systemic system. The failure of systems in Kenya has created the gaps that we see. That Anglo Leasing can take over 30 years to resolve. And when it came to resolving, we paid them money. And believe me or not, this money, somebody must have got a kickback. Those are the legal implications that the NGO Africa is talking about. It's sorry state. Very, very sorry. Yeah.
All right, and they also said publicity-driven prosecutions are likely to deepen rather than undermine corruption as indictments and prosecutions get weaponized to partisan ends of the 2022 politics. It's like the way we keep saying that the fight against corruption has been politicized. And that is just negating the gains that the government is trying to make against the war against corruption, because politics have come into it. So no progress is really being made because people are like, my person is being targeted. This is not corruption that is involved in. It is because he wants to be this in the next 2 years or 3 years, so that's why he's being targeted. So that is also has formed a part in why corruption has really thrived in this country. Politics has come into it.
Miriam, in the senses, yourself and your conscience,
yes,
what do you think we can do?
We can do.
Yesterday,
yes,
I tell you, I was faced with a very difficult situation on a television where I went. I don't know.
You went for the television
yes,
show?
I don't know. You must have missed.
I was in class, sorry.
At 9 o'clock, from 8 to 9, you were.
Yes.
I'm telling you, my sister, a topic that was put before us is, can we legalize corruption? Surely.
I'd replace that with what the Constitution.
And a gentleman who came out apparently looks like he's more of this group that wanders around. He said, yes, let's legalize it.
What do you mean, let's legalize it?
And then he went further to say, we now kill people. We just don't want to follow the rule of law. We just go and grab people, slaughter them, like a China.
Did he mean that, or he was just being funny?
No, he was serious. The debate ended there on those lines. I was pro the law, rule of law,
yes,
which the president has told us that we stick to the rule of law.
We have to follow the law, yes.
He was on slaughtering these guys, whether who slaughtered them. But you could see the first statement for him to say legalize it. How can you legalize? We must criminalize corruption, isn't it? You can't legalize corruption. That is the state of affairs our youth in this country are engaged in.
Like corruption to be legalized?
Yes.
How do you do that?
He couldn't explain one single item of legalizing corruption. He wanted it to be done summarily execution. We should not waste time going to court, because he says the court, I accepted that bit of the court because the court was not going to solve anything about corruption.
So we that sounds very hopeless when it comes to the courts. Yes,
we are in a hopeless state. So we have reached a tipping point. Go slow. We have reached a tipping point.
Go slow on Matiang'i. Ruto tells his troops, okay, I'm just going to be honest about this. It is the same Vice President Ruto who came out to say Matiang'i and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga should be answerable. Should give us. So now go slow on Matiang'i.
But haven't I been talking about Machiavellian politics?
What is wrong with the double speak?
Of planting story, then come to defend the story, then look so good in front of the president or in front of Matiang'i. I saved you. I cracked your back, touch my back. This is the politics. That's it. Anybody in Kenya should be able to know this. You see? Anybody will know. This story is planted in order to Matiang'i back, to say I stopped MPs from throwing you out. I need support.
Interesting. And also yesterday something wonderful happened. The president was in Ngara and he went to visit the Ngara affordable houses in construction. So actually the government is working towards realizing the affordable houses.
They will. With this remortgaging, remortgage house.
Yes.
First buyers, you can go and borrow money.
Okay.
And put on a house, say, this is what I've got, land, but this is what I don't have, a house. Do you want that house here or there? They will ask. And then they give you money. Some manager was explaining me last night. Then they can say, okay, if it is Kisumu, the conditions of Kisumu are like that.
Yes.
These are 1, 2, 3 terms of reference of obtaining the loan. Is this. And a house, a normal house in Kisumu, you with 2 children or 1 costs this much.
An estimated cost, yes.
Yes, so you'll be paying per month. After you are built it, we shall help you in supply. In fact, I will ask Fred to look for the command structure of housing that we did in Zimbabwe.
They have the same model?
No, the same model they are introducing here.
It is in
because
Zimbabwe.
in Zimbabwe, you go and you are even given credit on materials.
You're given the materials on credit?
Yes.
Okay.
To build the house. So you go on paying.
Okay.
Or if you agree they build for you, you pay them. But according to your likes, the material, they form a circle where you collect that material. Cement, iron sheets, nails. It's a command structure housing system that is controlled by the bank.
Okay. So that is what the banks here will be doing with that money.
We brought that video. Fred will look for it and we shall look at it, not now. That video was here.
So this is very good news, what the president is doing. And those in doubt, he might not be able maybe to achieve the 500,000 houses, but he would, from what I'm seeing and for the reports that already are there, and the houses, the others which are actually complete by now, I think he'll be able to do something substantial. So Kenyans should support that. Yeah.
So in a nutshell, Miriam, regime change, exactly. The pointers are here.
For a regime change?
Yes.
Why would you say that?
They are here.
What are the signs?
The signs, you look at the meetings,
yes.
the type of people in the meetings, David Ndii, you saw how he talked. Oh my God. As if this country is actually driving cars upside down. So they are here. It won't, we have to work hard, double hard, to sensitize the people that regime changing for the sake of regime changing does not help you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
I think that's all. Analysts.
No, I think we should look at some. You mentioned the South Sudan, and when I mentioned that the SPLA Day, the commemoration day that honors the people, the start of the war that culminated to a secession for South Sudan on 16th May. It's supposed to happen every year on 16th, and the government was not prepared for it.
Because it didn't have money.
Yes.
They don't have the money.
I think it's malicious.
No, they don't have the money. They are paying. If you have paid 3.7 to Renberg, where will you get the money?
And of course, the Libyan strongman Khalifa Haftar refused to heed to the call by French President Macron, and he's saying he will not halt the hostilities because, and he's not looking forward for a dialogue. So he told Macron no.
He's pounding. He has cut off water. People are dying. So let's prepare for death.
Let's prepare in Libya. All right. And what do you make of Fayulu advising the Malawians to be very vigilant and protect their votes? Martin Fayulu.
The opposition will cry the same like him. Mutaruka has already stolen that election.
So he has stolen.
I'm honest. I don't know whether you want me to do that, but...
So would that amount to, because I was just mentioned before I went for the break, in Kenya here, when the opposition leaders said that Kenyans should be vigilant and go protect their votes, his supporters took that very literally, and it almost became very chaotic. So is this a form of incitement to the people of Malawi?
You know what? Let's wait for the results.
Yes, the 20% that is still being tallied.
But
yes,
Miriam, I tell you, my sister, this is already rigged.
It's already rigged.
It's 5 days passed without results. A smaller country like Malawi.
6.8 voters, and I'm sure not all of them went to vote.
No.
Those are the registered voters.
You must have had about 5 million.
Maybe even 4.
Or 4 million.
From 6.8, yes. Normally the turnout. All right, so we'll give you the latest, and we'll keep you updated in that developing story. And of course, you're looking forward to attending the inauguration of Cyril Ramaphosa. Yesterday, he was duly elected in Parliament. They voted him again for his second term as the president of South Africa.
Yep.
All right. So do we say our byes, or do we take a break and come back?
No, we say our byes.
Yes.
We leave with the video of Cameroon.
All right.
Today, we are crying along that family. Thank you very much, viewers. We see you today, later, 3 p.m. East African time. I give Miriam a chance to select.
Select who? Samuel Lay, thank you. You're saying corruption.
To select the topic.
Corruption and stealing of public resources wouldn't go away until we get an honest and good leaders in Africa. That is to you and me. All right, thank you. Now we'll just brainstorm together with Steve as well, and you and me, and then we'll come up with a topic that...
No, you brainstorm.
What, you have a brain block right now? I see that you you just want to go to a spa somewhere. All right, then we'll see you at 3 p.m.
Why are you reporting me?
I'm not reporting.
Miriam.
I know you
wake up very sympathetic.
That's what I'm saying.
I woke up.
Did you hear what I suggested?
By the way, can we do a radio?
A radio?
A radio show here?
A radio show here at
yes,
radio?
Yes.
At 3? We
can do a radio show. I don't know whether Stephen can agree.
Does he have a choice?
You. Stephen, have you heard that?
When you say it, it should be taken in kindness.
Can we do a radio show where we speak from here?
Yes. And it's transmitted to the radio.
Yes.
I'm sure Steve can work something out. Yes, I'm sure he can.
it can, that same show, because there's then a pipe, a cable that can come here.
Did you just say a pipe?
Yes.
That is when we say goodbye and we see you at 3 p.m. Clearly. Yes, we need to rejuvenate and get back fresh and with an exciting topic. Which
thank you very much. Let the topic be unaffiliated. Can we do? We have taken long. You know, we're losing our audience out there, man.
Unfiltered.
Yes.
Okay.
We had an audience of unaffiliated, very many.
Okay.
After doing hard subjects of politics, we need to laugh a bit.
We just did. That's not enough.
No, you are the one who is laughing, who is making me laugh. Me, I'm gone.
Okay.
Yes,
you're gone. All right. Before you're completely gone, we'll just say bye and then we'll see you at 3 p.m. with Unfiltered or the People's Court. We will let you know. Just watch out for our alert.
This is Muyoka, southwest region of Cameroon. Over 24 hours after the shooting to death of a 4-month-old baby called Neba Martha Mbu, the mother, Emilia Agbo, remains unconsolable.
Papa, you don't hide to keep you on the touch here. Take this slip. I said, the box I cook too much, I go chop. Papa,
the father points accusing fingers on the Cameroonian military for killing his child.
In the morning, there was a gunshot. The convoys were going to Umba. Unfortunately, they returned back. They still shoot by 2 o'clock. So by that 2 o'clock, they shoot by that where they was passing. And unfortunately, they returned back now. They came inside the quarter and they started shooting. They surprised all of us. My wife was behind the house preparing food. So she placed the child on top of the chair here. So as the child was sleeping, I was in front of the door.
Today for morning time, I mean motor interfere will run. We'll go hide.
In the afternoon, a military vehicle came to the quarter. We ran for safety. They broke the door and shot the child. Here are the bullets we discovered after their departure.
Don't enter. Come on now, run.
To a neighbor watching the military men as they return after the incident attests that some of them blamed their colleague for shooting a baby.
Try to call within themselves why you shoot that kind of thing for that age. They try for exchange where they get a big call among them why you shoot that kind of people that age. Why they shoot that people that kind of age.
They talk and say it for French.
They say pourquoi tu tires le petit fila. Pourquoi tu tires.
Little Neba Martha Mbu shot dead and buried.
The inhabitants of this particular village, Muyoka, in the southwest region of the country, explained that the baby, Martha, that is 4 months, was lying in this particular spot, at this particular spot before suspected military men entered the house and broke the door, shooting her several times on the head. Some of them who witnessed the incident through a hideout indicated that the military man shot bullets around the house before shooting the little girl.
Now childless, Emilia Agbo, in agony and pains, packaged the dresses of her late baby. Few inhabitants of Muyoka regrets permanent attacks on both sides of the war.
My great friends and other people who are sitting here, who are standing to see, observe what has happened. We should pray that God should give us some enormous time to come together and live, to bring the words of God beside us.
The parents, while grieving the death of their only child, have turned down a convocation by security forces Muyoka to present a statement of what took place.
This is the particular building where inhabitants of Makanga 1, a neighborhood in Muyoka, in the southwest region of the country, say the 4-month-old child was shot here. That was on the 20th of May, the day the Cameroon government, or the government of Cameroon, was celebrating the National Day of this country. They indicated that several military men invaded this neighborhood, shooting indiscriminately. The parents of the child, 4 months, ran away, leaving the child behind when military men entered there, shooting her several times. Dominic Memenwa Kimo, reporting from Muyoka, Okanatu English.
Our ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, laid out a clear agenda for reform, but despite reported and repeated warnings, no action at all was taken. So the United States took the only responsible course. We withdrew from the Human Rights Council, and we will not return until real reform is enacted. For similar reasons, the United States will provide no support and recognition to the International Criminal Court. As far as America is concerned, the ICC has no jurisdiction, no legitimacy, and no authority. The ICC claims near universal jurisdiction over the citizens of every country, violating all principles of justice, fairness, and due process. We will never surrender America's sovereignty to an unelected, unaccountable global bureaucracy.
Trump's decision to come out of ICC, which is International Criminal Court, sends a lot of signals and a lot of happiness to some of us. From time of the inception of ICC, David Matanga and others, I want to thank David Hoyle, my professor, Professor Hoyle in London. Thank you very much for mentoring me to stand firm to discuss the African question on the ICC. It is very important, therefore, for the people of Africa to understand that while you rejoice, while you want to hate Trump, Trump has made it very clear that globalization is not part of his agenda.
America is governed by Americans. We reject the ideology of globalism, and we embrace the doctrine of patriotism. Around the world, responsible nations must defend against threats to sovereignty, not just from global governments, but also from other new forms of coercion and domination. In America, we believe strongly in energy security for ourselves and for our allies.
Today, as we speak, this nation cannot be the same. This nation is paralyzed. This nation needs serious redemption, needs the building of bridges. As a result of the ICC, the anger that was flowing from one end to the other created a problem that we see here, but people don't want to admit. People wait in Africa. Trump is correct. Let's wake up. Let's have a rebirth that delivers to hope so that our people don't perish in the Mediterranean Sea. A rebirth that will bring about peaceful resolution of conflicts, like the conflicts that occur in South Sudan between Riek Machar and Salva Kiir. These conflicts don't give us any hope. These conflicts don't give us anything that is yearned for. These conflicts are a pity to Africa. We are lulled into the ICC in 1998 by Kofi Annan. America rejected ICC, stood firm and said, we can give you the money, but we shall not ratify for you because we have institutions. We have failed our own judiciary systems, but we want to be judged by another judiciary system which has no jury, it has no evidence, it has no separation of powers between the chief prosecutor and the investigative arm, and then with the prosecuting arm. That's the Africa we have.